We have it. The 2020 Australian Open draw. The tennis season has officially begun. This is a very special occasion. Of course, we only do 4 of these draw shows for majors a year. It is, again, a very special occasion, obviously, for any big tennis fan like myself. But one of the things I can't get off my mind is the tennis history and the importance of this year, 2020. We hear all the time the pundits and experts talk about you're watching history unfold when we're watching the majors on TV. But every year, we have all 4 majors. Sure, it's only 4, but compared to something like a Super Bowl, a World Series, a World Cup, having 4 a year, that's a little bit more frequent than what we see with other sports. And there's plenty of players throughout history who have won a major or 2 or 3, and you could argue that their resumes look like failures when compared to the resumes of Roger, Rafa, and Novak. It is one of the most interesting and entertaining storylines we have ever seen in any sport, and definitely in tennis, the GOAT race, the greatest of all time debate. And to me, 2020, this is the most important year yet. If we go back 3 years ago, right here at the Australian Open, that was a very pivotal time because Roger won the Australian Open after having not won since 2012. For 5 years, he doesn't win. Everyone is assuming that Rafa and Djokovic will catch him, and Roger wins 2 that year, going to Wimbledon and winning that as well. Novak goes from winning everything to can't win anything at all, like that. And Rafa steps up and grabs the other 2 majors of the year in 2017. So that shook things up, and that changed the debate. Here we are 3 years later, and I have this article in my hand that I almost couldn't believe from Forbes.com, quoting Roger Federer as saying, "It is obvious that Rafa and Novak will win more Grand Slam titles than him." Now, when I first saw stuff like that out there, I assumed, we see a lot of misleading headlines in the media, not just the tennis media, all over the place. And I assumed it was one of those. But Roger did say something like that. He didn't exactly say that. Roger said, "I think the way it's going, obviously, Rafa and Novak will win more because they're just that good. And the season they had in 2019, it shows that there is more to come for them." Roger said there's more to come for them, but he didn't say there's no more to come for him. But he's 38 and a half. He will be, this time next year, 39 and a half. Nobody wins majors at 39. Sure, we've all heard of that stat. It's a stat to most of us because it happened so long ago. But when Ken Rosewall was 39, he made it to the Wimbledon final. And he got pretty much a beatdown from a young Jimmy Connors. So if you're Roger Federer, are you really counting on winning Wimbledon next year at 39, only a few weeks away from turning 40? Roger acknowledges in this article that 2020 is all set, but he can't say for sure in 2021. He says that he would like to play, but it depends how the body is feeling a year from now. Who can tell, especially when you're almost 39? So for Roger Federer, the window is quite small. That makes 2020 very important for him. If he wants to stay ahead of Rafa and Djokovic, it's not going to be enough to just cross your fingers and hope that the next gen takes those guys out and they never win again. That is probably unlikely. But if Roger could get one more, he may be able to put it out of reach, or the ultimate irony, get it to a spot 21 where Novak and Rafa can't pass him. Maybe all 3 of them tie. Wouldn't that be great? So Roger knows his window is small, but he's going to go out there and swing away. I think a lot of experts out there would agree with me when I say I give Roger a shot to get one this year. Maybe one next year, probably not after 2021. Be a lot to ask of somebody over the age of 40 to win a major. But think about Rafa. His window. Is it much bigger than 1 to 2 years like Roger's window? I mean, just look at the ATP Cup. After losing to Novak Djokovic, Spain had a chance to beat Serbia in the ATP Cup final in the doubles to decide it all. And Rafa, who some would say is a pretty good doubles player, maybe better than Djokovic, he had a chance to clinch it for his team for Spain. He chose not to play. He said basically he was exhausted. And I'm sure he didn't say it was because of the Australian Open, but I'm sure the Australian Open was on his mind when he pulled out of that doubles match. And don't forget, we've seen in the last few years, Rafa have to shut down months out of his season, just large chunks. He had to shut down to get the body healthy enough to have a chance to win the French Open. And don't forget that we've seen Rafa have to pull out of the Australian Open and the US Open, the hard court majors, multiple times. We've seen Rafa deep in the tournament, and then his body fails him, and he has to get out of the tournament. So what kind of window does Rafa have? Again, to me, 2020 is going to be the most important. If Rafa can grab 2, he's probably going to be the GOAT. If he can grab 1, he gives himself a chance. If Rafa doesn't win a major this year, the stakes are very high. If he doesn't win one this year, who's going to guarantee that he can win one next year or ever again? And then think about Novak Djokovic. Novak Djokovic, like I just said, in 2017, we saw the guy go from winning pretty much everything to winning nothing. Sure, he came back in 2018 and 2019, but think about 2019. It was a success for Djokovic, but a lot of bad tournaments. And not to mention the way he had to leave the U.S. Open, losing the Dominic Thiem on clay at the French Open. There's no guarantee that Djokovic has a great window. And while he is a little bit younger, a year younger than Nadal, much younger than Roger Federer, he's got to win a lot more. Rafa's 1 away, 2 away from taking the lead in the slam race, 1 away from tying Federer. Novak's 4 away, 5 majors away. Now, if Roger and Rafa aren't playing in a year or two's time, you would say, okay, well, Djokovic clearly he'll start winning everything, but then he'll be older. And then you got guys like Medvedev, who proved to us at the U.S. Open last year that anything's possible, these next-gen guys, and someone like Medvedev, he might be able to do it. Wouldn't be shocking if he won the Australian Open, if he beat Djokovic in the final at the Australian Open this year, a couple weeks from now. Would it shock you? I don't think it would shock anybody. It's why a lot of experts and pundits out there are predicting we will get one major this year that's not from the big three, that's from a next-gen type player. Tsitsipas, right here at the Australian Open last year, showed us that he can beat a big three player at a major, beating Roger Federer. So I ask you, my tennis friends out there, comment below. Am I right? Is this it? Is this do or die time? Is this the most important year ever in the history of tennis? Because this will be ultimately the year that decided who was going to be the greatest of all time. Because I sure think so. Longest intro of all time. Today on Coffee Break Tennis, we will go through the 2020 Australian Open men's draw. Also, experts. The experts out there have some opinions on who will win this thing. We'll look at a couple experts' opinions. Also, the bushfires. We will talk about what's going on. Surely you've heard by now that some of the players in qualifying are complaining about the conditions, having to play in smoke and having a hard time breathing. So we'll talk about the latest on everything that's going on with the bushfires and how it is affecting the Australian Open tournament. Plus, bushfire related, this fellow named Braden Schnurr. This guy, Braden Schnurr, perhaps you've never heard of him. He is a low-ranked tennis player who recently said Roger and Rafa are too selfish to care about the lower-ranked players. We'll talk about that and a special thank you to start the show today. So I want to give a big shout out to Essential Tennis and Ian Westerman over at Essential Tennis, who gave us a really nice shout out. I think it was early January or right after Christmas, right before New Year's. Ian over at his Essential Tennis, they're a tennis instruction channel, kind of like Crunch Time Coaching, one of the original tennis instruction channels, I should say, one of the big ones out there. Anyways, Ian does great work over at Essential Tennis. I've had the pleasure of getting to interview Ian a couple times for TennisCon, a big event we put on in October, Crunch Time Coaching, where we take some of the best tennis coaching minds from around the world and put together a big presentation for players out there who want to improve their games. And Ian's always been a great interview, giving me really good stuff that I learned some stuff every time I talk to Ian. He's a guy who's really devoted his life to tennis, and he made a great video talking about the 2020 YouTube tennis channels you should pay attention to. And he showed a bunch of clips from Coffee Break Tennis, and he said a lot of nice things. And he recommended a bunch of people come subscribe, and hundreds of people came and subscribed almost immediately after Ian gave me the shout out. So big thanks to Ian. If you've never seen Essential Tennis, go check it out. They don't just do tennis instruction. They do videos like that one where they're talking about who you should be looking out for on YouTube. He also gave out a nice shout out to my friend Steven Boughton, over at The Slice, Mr. Slice. That's his name, Stephen Boughton. So without further ado, let's put the racket down. Let's get into this draw. First off, put this on the screen. These are our projected Sweet 16, fourth round of 16 meetings between the seeds. And we could see Nadal, Khachanov, Gael Monfils, and Dominic Thiem. Could see that happening. Medvedev and Wawrinka, yeah, maybe that could happen. But right here is where it all goes wrong. Sasha Zverev, I doubt, will make the fourth round after how bad he looked at the ATP Cup. Berrettini has not played since the World Tour Finals, which didn't go very well for him. Fognini, who I think has to play Riley Opelka first up. That's no fun. I don't think he's getting there. Shapo and Federer looks like it could happen, and for Federer fans, not the greatest matchup after we saw what Shapo did at ATP Cup, almost beating Djokovic. Well, almost. I mean, When you watched Medvedev Djokovic, you really felt like Medvedev could win. When you watched Shapovalov and Djokovic, you really felt like this is interesting. This is great for Shapo. There's no way he's going to win by the end of this. Tsitsipas, Batista, Agut, we could see that, and Schwartzman and Djokovic. Is it going to happen? Great comment from the Fergoico, who are on Facebook, saying Diego, Fonini, Kachanov, Berrettini definitely won't make it. So a quick check. Do I have them making it? I went through the entire draw, and I filled in everything that I think will happen. I spent a lot of time on the draw this year. Maybe I should play ATP racket or Tennis Channel racket bracket, whoever sponsors it. I've got Zverev going out in the second round, so he's not going to make it. I've got Diego Schwartzman, going down in the third round right before that round of 16, so he'll fall just short. Although that was a tougher pick for me, Dusan Lajovic over Diego. I'm not 100% sure on that, but Dusan Lajovic has done a lot of winning lately with Team Serbia. He should be feeling pretty good. And I've got no Kachanov there. I've got no Monfils or Dominic Thiem, and I don't have Wawrinka coming through either. Now, one thing we're going to do in the show in a little bit is I want to compare the 2017 Australian Open Federer draw to this one, because to me, they're very similar in a lot of ways. We'll do that in a little, but first, let's just go through the top half of the draw. What do we see happening here? So put it up on the screen. Ollie's seeded projections, sponsored and brought to you by Ollie Payton. So you see it's Hugo Delien from Bolivia, Yao Souza or Federico Del Bonis. Both these guys, not really their time of year, haven't been looking good. Pablo Carreno Busta or a qualifier. Teammate, Pablo Carreno Busta after the tournament, he said, after ATP Cup, he said, it was really valuable and nice to spend so much time in close proximity to Rafa Nadal. How is he going to beat Rafa Nadal in the third round? Will he be there? I think I do have him going there because there's really nothing else going on in that part of the draw. So Pablo Carreno Busta, depending on which qualifiers they get. The fourth round for Rafa, Rafa's draw is pretty good. But look at that fourth round and look at that semifinal. Those were people you did not want to play. Obviously, Kachanov, not the most impressive ATP Cup, but he's going to get a lot of action out of his ball and his power on this fast Australian Open court. This is the fastest court of the four majors, so he could be a threat, but Nick Kyrgios even more so. We saw how hot Nick Kyrgios was at the ATP Cup. The only time Nick Kyrgios looked bad was when he lost to Roberto Batista Agut, and it was really about the conditions. The court was playing much slower, the ball was staying much lower, and the explosiveness and the big serve of Nick Kyrgios, he didn't get as much out of it. He will get it here with your hot conditions and your super fast court at the Australian Open. Quarterfinal, Dominic Thiem, Monfils. So this is what I have coming up. Put it on the screen. For Rafa, I got him coming through, but then he plays Nick Kyrgios in the fourth round. And after seeing all of the struggles from Rafa at the ATP Cup and the way it ended, if Nick Kyrgios, also seeing how hot Nick Kyrgios was, if Nick Kyrgios gets hot out here, and we know he's going to want to compete, he's going to have to get through Kachanov. He's going to have to get through Pablo Cuevas and Lorenzo Sonego. I would think Nick is going to find a way to win these matches. We certainly all would hope. It'll make the tournament a lot more fun if he does. And I would think that he could beat Karen Kachanov, who, again, not the most impressive ATP Cup, but not bad enough to think he won't make it to the third round. I got Nick beating Rafa. Now, it's hard to count out Rafa, but just looking at where we're at and the fact that Rafa doesn't like playing Nick and the fact that this is probably the best court in the world for Nick to play Rafa on, I give Nick a good chance. Kyrgios in the quarterfinals. Now, when we look at the section below that, that's where the draw is pretty easy for Rafa. Now, maybe Dominic Thiem will catch fire, but he had a very bad ATP Cup. Not impressed at all by Dominic Thiem's ATP Cup, and Dominic Thiem never really does that well here. So I've got Karlovic coming through the popsicle just because Karlovic in that serve, it's not going to be fun to face on a court this fast. I got Felix coming through a qualifier, Felix Auger all day, and coming through Aljaz Bedene. Felix, I think he only had one win at the ATP Cup, and that was, what was the guy's name? Pervilakis. Some guy that only played in the ATP Cup because Tsitsipas is the only high-ranked player in Greece. Pervilakis, what is he, like 500, 600 in the world, somewhere around there. And that was really the only win Felix had. Felix, not super impressive, although Felix is in Adelaide and has picked up a couple wins since then. We'll learn a lot about where Felix is right now. Adelaide is pretty similar to the Australian Open as far as I can tell with conditions and the way the court is playing. So we'll learn a lot because Rublev is who Felix is going to play only a few hours from the time this video will go up on YouTube. So we'll learn a lot there. I have him coming through Monfils. Maybe, that's a really tough little section to pick, and it doesn't matter too much because eventually, one of these guys is going to be in the quarterfinal against Rafa or maybe Nick Kyrgios, and you don't see them beating a Rafa for sure. And Nick Kyrgios, they only beat him if somehow he just falls apart. I do have Dominic Thiem getting through to the third round, but then he could run into who I think is going to be there, not your seed Taylor Fritz, 29 seed. I think Kevin Anderson comes through because, one, he's only got to win 2 to get there. And he won 2 at the ATP Cup out of his 3, and he gave Djokovic, this is Kevin Anderson's first competitive ATP match in, I think it was half a year since his last match because of injury. He gave Djokovic a pretty tough match going 2 tiebreak sets, and I was pretty impressed with the way Anderson came right back into things, and with his serve and this surface, the Australian Open surface, and how hungry Anderson has to be. Again, players get very hungry when they've had to sit out. These guys, they devote their whole lives to this sport, to training and trying to get wins and play well at the biggest tournaments. When you got to sit out for half a year, Anderson, this is a good enough draw to me. And knowing how Dominic Thiem historically is not great here, I see Anderson able to come through this and make it to the 4th round. And whether it's Monfils or Felix Auger-Aliassime, this is a perfect draw for Anderson to make it to that quarterfinal. So for Rafa, if he could get Kevin Anderson, who just won 4 matches and feeling really good, on this court, that could be a tricky quarterfinal. And if Anderson gets Nick Kyrgios, who knows? Wouldn't be shocked to see Anderson get through to the semifinals, but for the love of the game, for the fun, for believing in something really fun and exciting happening, I've got Nick Kyrgios making the Australian Open semifinals. Just imagine, especially with everything going on with the bushfires. I should say, Nick Kyrgios started off this whole charity event, Aces for Australia. Every time Nick Kyrgios hits an ace, he's donating money to fight the bushfires. So Nick Kyrgios, this would be a great year for him to step up and do something like make a semifinal or even a final, which is actually what I put on this draw. Again, when I fill out these draws, it's hard to do, what you think will happen and what you kind of hope will happen to make an exciting, fun tournament. When we look at the bottom section of the top half, the quarter below Rafa's quarter, this is the Medvedev and Sasha Zverev quarter. Now, I've got Sasha Zverev going down in the second round to Casper Ruud boy. Casper Ruud, I think, will take down Sasha Zverev just because Sasha Zverev has been that bad and Casper Ruud has been good enough to think it could happen. Basilashvili and Verdasco, they've each got, I think, 2 wins this year so far. It's a tough call there, but I'll give Ruud, again, like kind of a good draw for him, having to playing number 7 in the world. That's usually tough in the second round, except it's Sasha Zverev, who's in the worst place he's ever been. Sasha Zverev hit, I think the stat was, Sasha Zverev at the ATP Cup in 3 matches, he had the same number double faults as he had service. It was like 31 or 34 double faults on 34 service games. So this is a tough time. If anyone is feeling good at all, they can knock him out here. I don't think it'll be Cecchinato, the Italian guy who made it, to the semifinals or the quarterfinals of the French Open a couple years ago. It's not going to be him, but I think it could be Casper Ruud, Verdasco, Basilashvili. Casper Ruud, if he gets the confidence of beating a big name like Zverev, I could see him coming through to the 4th round where he'll run into the buzzsaw, Andrei Rublev. Rublev, this mean Russian, he's been impressive, and I think we could see him in an all-Russian quarterfinal with Medvedev. I think he'll beat David Goffin. I think David Goffin will come through Shardy. I think Pierre-Hugues Herbert. I think with this court, his ability to come to the net and his accuracy on the serve, that'll give him a shot to beat Cam Norrie, who's had a bad start to the year. I got Rublev coming through the Australian wild card, coming through Yuichi Sugita, coming through David Goffin, although that could be a tough match. I could go either way on that. Coming through to the quarterfinals where you have Medvedev. And this is an interesting section because Medvedev has Francis Tiafoe first. Remember, Francis Tiafoe, a large chunk of his rankings points came from his run last year where, what did he lose to Rafa in the quarterfinals last year? Tiafoe, I don't see any chance that he'll beat Medvedev. Jaume Munara and Tsonga I have below there. Tsonga has only played 1 match, I think, and lost it. But we'll give Tsonga a chance to come through the 3rd round. He will not beat Medvedev. Whereas we have Isner. Isner could use a good result here, and he's got a section where he can work with. I see Stan Wawrinka. I got Stan the man going down to Damir Zumar because I think it was Braden Schnurr who said, with the conditions from the bushfires, it's like you're playing in cigarette smoke constantly. Well, Damir Zumar is one of the few ATP players out there that I know of who actually, or at least he did a couple years ago, smoked cigarettes. So, major edge there for Zumar. He will zoom through Stan Wawrinka and lose, and beat Kekmanovic, and then lose to the big serving John Isner because of his immunity to the cigarette-like conditions. And of course, these matches will all be on the outdoor courts. So I like Isner's chance to come through here and get to the fourth round, but I do not like Isner beating Medvedev. Aside from Rublev, maybe David Goffin, if he's just playing great and loving the Australian Open this year, Medvedev appears of the top 4 players to have the easiest draw of them all. I have Medvedev, though, losing to a very inspired Nick Kyrgios in the semifinals or beating Rafa. I don't think Rafa will beat Medvedev here. I wouldn't be surprised to see a semifinal where it's Medvedev and Rafa has to tap out again like we've seen in recent history at the Australian Open and the US Open. Rafa can't keep going in a battle. Could be something like what we saw at the US Open. They're in the 4th set, they're in the 5th set, and Rafa will tap out. Wouldn't shock me at all after seeing how worn down Rafa got at the ATP Cup. He's crazy to play the thing for the love of the game and to help out the ATP maybe. All right, let's go to the more exciting part of the draw for the Federer fans. And let's run through Djokovic's bottom quarter really quick. Djokovic from the Ollie forecast. Jan-Lennard Struff. Not the easiest first round match. Guy's got a monster serve. It's a fast court. Is Djokovic going to lose to Struff? I doubt it. Still, though, not the easiest. But after that, the draw's not so bad. Tatsuma Ito, a lot of Japanese guys. Nishioka, or perhaps Dirty Dan Evans in the third round. I think Dan Evans didn't he lose in the third round last year to Federer, but it was a pretty tough match. I think it was straight sets, but a couple tie breaks maybe. Dan Evans, you could see him having a little run here, making the third round. And you could see him giving Djokovic a tough match. But again, is Djokovic going to lose to this guy? I don't think so. Lajovic or Schwartz-Didi, I think Djokovic will know what to do, especially after spending all that time. Although Lajovic got a lot of time to watch Djokovic and observe him in the ATP Cup. So I think Djokovic will know what to do against Dusan Lajovic. Above that, the Tsitsipas section, he's got Salvatore Caruso. That's the guy who... He had like a good run at Wimbledon or the French Open and lost to Djokovic last year, 3rd or 4th round, but he'd come all the way through qualifying. That's a nice story. I don't think he's going to give Steph too much trouble. Phil Kohlschreiber, who just won a challenger. I don't think it was the one where Nick Kyrgios is from, where they had to postpone the start because of the smoke in Canberra. Kohlschreiber just won in a challenger, like a minor league tournament. A lot of times for these guys like Kohlschreiber's veterans, that's all you really need to get the ball rolling again. That's enough confidence where he could be a little bit dangerous. I see him getting the second round, but I don't think he will beat the Colts Pickle will beat Steph. I don't see it happening. Christian Green, not his time of year. Again, Milos Raonic I have coming through there. Steph will beat Raonic for sure. I got Benoit Paire coming through, who had an interesting match with Jannik Sinner the other night, I thought. Jannik Sinner, man, he looks really good, but Benoit Paire with these fast hard courts in Australia. Benoit Paire's got so much firepower on the serve, and the backhand is one of the best. So I got Benoit Paire coming through and losing to Marin Cilic, but that's a tough one to pick. I think Marin Cilic has done so much here in the past, he'll be able to figure it out. Roberto Bautista Agut I have coming through there. Tough to pick who will win, Cilic or Roberto Bautista Agut. I could see Roberto Bautista winning. I could also see Cilic really getting things together, using the big serve capability on the fast court. Either way, I got Steph coming through to the quarterfinals. Although don't forget, last year after he beats Federer, he has a pretty tough time with RBA, Mr. Roberto. So we'll see, but I got Steph coming through. And I'm sure no one has Steph beating Djokovic. And I don't know if it's more about my Federer draw and just wanting to boost his chances. Of course, wanting Roger. All the Fed fans would love to see Federer beat. One, we'd love to see Federer beat Tsitsipas for revenge from last year, but two, because that would mean he had beat Djokovic or Djokovic had lost in a shock. And I have Steph coming through, giving us another inspired performance at the Australian Open and beating a big three player. I wouldn't bet anything on that happening, but all of us will give him a shot. A lot of people are saying Tsitsipas is one of the favorites to do it here. Aside from one of the trickier for the big three, I guess Struff is the trickiest first round match. Not too big of a deal. Aside from that, in Tsitsipas, I think this draw is pretty easy for Djokovic. Obviously, in the semifinal, if he could play Federer, that could be an epic battle like at Wimbledon. But Djokovic's draw looks pretty good to me. The only way he's losing before Federer or whoever is in the semifinal is Tsitsipas. Now, when we look at the Federer portion of the draw, picking Matteo Berrettini is very tricky because, one, I was going to say he has no chance to make it to the fourth round when you just first look at the seeded projections. But then you look at his draw, and, Tennis Sandgren could be his second round. He's got a wild card, Australian wild card in the first round. Matteo, even if he's not feeling great, even if he hasn't played since the World Tour Finals in early November, you would think he could get through those guys. But then we have Sam Querrey and Benoit Paire. Now, Benoit Paire has not been impressive either at the ATP Cup. Benoit Paire played. He's got one win over Dominic Thiem. That's a good win, but then he had two really bad losses. Benoit Paire or Sam Querrey, both of these guys have the experience to where if they make it to that third round and they've got the draw in the second round, that's the toughest match here. If they make it to that third round and they play Berrettini, I think either one of them fully capable of taking out a Berrettini who's still trying to find his game. But of course, this is a fast, low-bouncing court, and we've seen what Berrettini can do on grass. It's where he really broke out last year. So I wouldn't be shocked if he finds it because of the easiness of this draw. But don't expect him to beat Sam Querrey if Sam Querrey decides, hey, I'm really loving how my serve feels on this fast court and is having a hell of a time. So we'll see with that. And then below that, Fabio Fognini's got to play Riley Opelka. Riley Opelka hasn't done much yet, but he's played one match. I think he's only played one match so far this season, and he lost. But a couple tie breaks. He does this all the time. And the last time we really saw him play, what was it? I think it was in Switzerland at Basel, the Swiss indoors tournament, and he got a lot of nice wins, played a lot of tiebreakers, found ways to win there. I think he can pick up right where he left off. Riley Opelka could be our surprise fourth round person here. Would not shock me. Guido Pella, Jordan Thompson, Bublik. I don't see any obvious names in this little section right here. This is the toughest one to pick, and I'm going to throw it out there and say Riley Opelka or Sam Querrey come through there just because of the serve and what they can do on this court with that serve. Then we go to the section of Roger. So right here, Shapo will have to play Fucsovics, Jannik Sinner in a qualifier. We could see Shapo and Sinner, which would be an interesting match. Would not be shocked to see Sinner have his breakout performance and beat Shapo and make it to the third round and the fourth round as well. But I'll say since everyone thinks Shapo's so hot right now, the thing about Shapo is he's got so much game. He's such an offensive threat, but it's really hard for him to just harness it and keep it going consistently for whole matches, for whole weeks, whole tournaments. So can he do it? It's a big question. Jannik Sinner, he's got some of that too, and if he can put it all together, don't be shocked if he finds a way to win. I have Shapo coming through, though. Below that, Leo Meyer, Tommy Paul. Probably should go with Tommy Paul there. Juan Ignacio Londero, Grigor Dimitrov. I got Dimitrov coming through there. When Tommy Paul could do it, guys got a lot of firepower. But Dimitrov coming through to the third round, and Shapo or Jannik Sinner, and I've got one of them coming through. Let's call it Shapo. Then for Federer, we got Steve Johnson. Then he could play Filip Krajinovic. Then he could play what looks like it's going to be Hubert Hurkacz from Poland. Now, Hurkacz, he's still playing. Maybe he'll be a little worn out. Who knows? ATP Cup, he went undefeated. I think it was last year at Indian Wells. Hurkacz was a real challenge for Roger Federer. And we all know what he's capable of. At the ATP Cup, he went undefeated. All the talk of Djokovic and Roberto Bautista Agut undefeated. Well, Poland, maybe they could have made it deeper if the rest of the team had performed, because Hurkacz was undefeated. He beat Dominic Thiem, beat Benoit Paire, and I think he beat Diego Schwartzman. All those are good wins. He was number one in Poland, so he had to play the best the other countries had to offer that they went up against. And he's gone on to, I think he's in Auckland now, and he's already won a few more matches there. He's about to play Benoit Paire in a little bit, only a few hours from now. So Hurkacz could be a problem, but that's where I'm looking at this draw, and I'm starting to hit me. This is very similar to the 2017 draw. Maybe not with all the top players going 5 sets towards the end of the tournament, but it really starts off. So in 2017, Federer hadn't played in a long time, caught everyone by surprise. Same with this year, skips the ATP Cup. We haven't seen him in a little while, not as long as then, but still a gap of not seeing Federer play before a major. And he played Jürgen Melzer, a guy who had done big things in his career, but in 2017, he had been falling. His ranking had been falling. He had not had the results, and he doesn't really play much more after this. He retires not much after this. Roger has Steve Johnson. Same kind of deal. Now, Jurgen Melzer, I think he had made it as high as top 10, or he was very close. He was top 15 in the world, top 12, something like that. Stevie Johnson, his height is like just inside top 20, like 21 in the world, something like that. So Steve Johnson, kind of a similar player to a Jurgen Melzer at this stage, and that's who Roger Federer has first. And if Roger's a little rusty, just like I think Roger lost the second set to Jurgen Melzer in 2017, we could see maybe Roger could lose a set to Stevie Johnson. This is the kind of guy where if Roger's not feeling his best because he hasn't played matches since November, he can lose a set to a guy like Stevie Johnson, who, remember, his backhand is so bad that he stopped hitting his two-hand backhand and only exclusively hits slice backhands. On a court like this, yeah, I know the slice can be dangerous on a fast, low court like the Australian Open, but someone like Federer is so good at sensing when the short ball is coming that he's going to move up and take the next ball very early. There's no way he's going to lose to Stevie Johnson unless it's just the best day of Stevie Johnson's life and one of the worst for Federer. So you could see him dropping a set and still winning. Probably good since Federer hasn't played a competitive match since early November. Then he's got Krajinovic, or a qualifier. Now, he played Noah Rubin, the qualifier, in 2017. That was a good match. I think Federer actually won that in straight sets, but there was a couple tie breaks. It was a competitive match. And you could see the same thing here. Krajinovic is a guy who is probably not a real threat to Roger here, but it could be a tough match. It could be enough of a challenge if Federer is still trying to find things, or it could be a qualifier, not Krajinovic, but you still see Federer finding a way through that. And that's when you get to the third round. Now, 2017, no one really thought Federer had a great shot to win it or go deep until after he played Tomas Berdych, who was considered a real challenge at the time in that third round, and Federer thumped him. Every Federer fan remembers the feeling of that special day. Hubie Hurkacz is kind of a similar spot. Big, tall guy who moves well for his height and has a big serve and great ground strokes, and has proved that he can beat top players. He just beat Dominic Thiem not that long ago, a couple weeks ago. So Hurkacz, Federer fans are going to be nervous going into that match, I'm sure. But to me, this is the perfect draw so far because it's a lot like 2017. You got a couple opponents you can work your way through to start off for Federer. And then in the third round, you got Hurkacz. I mean, last year, Dan Evans in the third round is kind of similar as well. But Hurkacz, I think, is more of a challenge. He's more of a real threat to Federer. I have Federer soaring high with the Eagles and taking down the Birdman, Hubie Hurkacz this time around, just like in 2017. And that's when we get to the fourth round, which back in 2017, that was world number 5 at the time, Nishikori. Nishikori is not playing this year. El Chapo, who is the 13 seed, not exactly the 5 seed, and a little bit different of a history, but still players that are dangerous on fast hard courts and have done enough on them in the past to prove a real challenge for the fourth round for Roger Federer. Now, to me, this fourth round is actually really close to last year's fourth round. Someone who has a one-handed backhand, is a next-gen player, and has had some results recently that make people think, watch out for this up-and-coming guy. Last year, it was Steph Tsitsipas in the fourth round, and he was the 14 seed. If he was the 13 seed, or if Shapo was the 14 seed this year, then I would say too superstitious. This is really bad omen. Who thinks that Shapo will beat Roger Federer at the Australian Open in best out of 5? I certainly don't think so, but I know a lot of people are worried about that because Shapo has looked more and more dangerous. Anyways, I don't have enough faith in Shapo being able to maintain the high level long enough to beat Roger if we get this match. And now we go to the quarterfinals. Remember, after Federer had beat Nishikori, he goes to the quarterfinals, and his reward is a total shock. And what do you know? This year, again, this section up there, whether it's Riley Opelka or Guido Pella or Sam Querrey, heck, even Matteo Berrettini, who's just relatively new on the scene as a top player, it's going to be a surprise, just like Misha Zverev, Sasha Zverev's older brother. Remember, he had beat Andy Murray in 2017. He was in the quarterfinals. That was a surprise match where you're like, who would have said Federer and Misha Zverev in the quarterfinal? Well, don't be surprised what I have this year, Federer and Riley Opelka in the quarterfinals. I know it's a little bit of a stretch, but again, on this surface, with that kind of serve, Opelka, Sam Querrey, they could come through. Maybe it's Matteo Berrettini. Either way, it's like a guy that you don't expect to see as your quarterfinal opponent. Roger comes through there just like he did in 2017. And then your semifinal. If it's Djokovic, that is nothing like 2017. One of the great things about 2017 is Roger didn't have to play Djokovic. He did play Rafa in the final, which who knows, maybe that could happen again this time, just like 2017. But if it's Steph, number 4 Stan with the one-handed backhand and the hard court offensive firepower, that's who Roger had to beat in 2017 in the semifinals. If it's Steph Tsitsipas, which I mostly picked getting through Djokovic because we know he can do it. We know he can beat Joker. But I mostly picked Steph getting through here because it fulfills my, this is just like 2017, therefore Roger Federer has a shot to win it. We get a top 6, almost top 4, close enough, one-handed backhand guy who everyone in 2017 gave Wawrinka a chance to win it, and a lot of people are saying Steph is one of the favorites with a chance to win it. So here we go. Let's look at what the experts have to say. You just heard me go, man, another really long show. You just heard me go on and on about this draw. Let's see what some of the experts have to say. Medvedev is a curveball, according to John McEnroe. These younger players need to accept that they need to keep adding to their game and doing something different. That's why Medvedev has had success, because he's thrown a curveball at these top guys that they weren't anticipating. It's almost like he went back to the juniors and is pushing the ball. No one expected to see that from him. It's been a very effective tool mentally. Yeah, Medvedev, he hits this flat ball. He stays back. You could say he's kind of pushing the ball, but then he absolutely crushes the ball when he sees a chance to counterpunch. Then McEnroe talks about how he gave the middle finger to the U.S. Open crowd and said that, thanks for booing me because that's why I won. That's one of the gutsiest things I've ever seen, says McEnroe. He was embracing the booing, and that's that type of stuff that took a lot of cojones, as they say, according to McEnroe. You still got to put those guys ahead of the other guys, talking about Nadal and Djokovic and Federer. They just know how to get it done. But Medvedev, to me, is the guy that has the best chance of winning it right now. He showed a gear that we haven't seen at the U.S. Open. Of course, everyone is on notice knowing about that. Now, Mats Wilander, who we usually lampoon here at Coffee Break Tennis. But, I mean, come on, the guy, he knows his tennis, right? He's got to. One, he picks Serena because he says this fast court, he gives a lot of good stuff here about Serena Williams. One, Margaret Court will be there because it's the 50th anniversary, just like Laver last year, of her 1970 Grand Slam, winning all 4 majors in 1 year. Everyone knows Serena is 1 shy of the Margaret Court record, kind of like Rafa is 1 shy of Roger. And I think it's a good reason to say, oh, Margaret Court's there watching. Serena will probably be extra motivated. But most important to me, the reason why Serena has a shot, and I agree, this court, when you rely on a serve and an offensive tennis, this is the best place to do it. This and Wimbledon, and this is even faster, as we now know, than Wimbledon. So Serena, he gives a shot, and what do you know? Mats Wilander is actually given Federer a real shot to come win it, because think about it, I mean, pretty much the same stuff applies. Federer's serve is going to do the most damage out of the 4 majors right here in Wimbledon, and I think it's even more dangerous here. I think Federer's going to hit more aces here at the Australian Open this year than he will at Wimbledon, unless Wimbledon speeds up that grass or something. In Australia, it could be a breakout performance from anybody, and I think you can add Roger Federer in 2017. Like I'm saying, Mats Wilander says, Federer in 2017 is an example of a breakout performance. Roger was someone you didn't expect because he was too old 3 years ago, and he went and won it. Rafa didn't play for 4 months, and he made the final. Last year, he barely played, and he made the final. Another reason why I'm not thrilled that Rafa played this crazy 3-city ATP Cup thing. Think about the last couple of years, how Rafa, the way we covered him going to the Australian Open is like, will he play anything before the Australian Open? And he pretty much skipped even exhibitions. I think Australia lends itself to a breakout performance from somebody unexpected, and I wouldn't be surprised if Federer at 38, bordering on 39, has a run and wins it. Just think about it. Mats Wilander continues. Australia often proves conducive to breakout performances. Think Tsitsipas last year beating Fed. Hyun Chung, Kyle Edmund making the semifinals a couple of years ago, beating Djokovic for Chung. I think someone like Shapo on a fast court being left-handed, it's a massive, massive danger to everybody. That was the most impressive thing about Shapo playing against Djokovic was the serving. Shapo, when he beat Tsitsipas in 2 tiebreakers, the serving was incredible, and it will be very dangerous here. I mean, it's a little dangerous for Federer playing Shapo, but at the same time, because of this surface, Shapo's serve will be very valuable. But how many times have we seen Federer pick apart somebody on a fast court with a big serve? Federer is one of the best at stepping in and blocking really big serves back. Djokovic overall is a better returner, but Federer's ability to chip and neutralize massive serves on fast courts. I think he's the best ever at that. Obviously, Nick Kyrgios on a fast court being in Australia is a massive danger, so it could be a breakout performance from the two of them. Then someone like Tsitsipas probably for the first time put in a category of very close to being the favorite. And then he basically gives us these groups. Favorites are Federer, Medvedev, Tsitsipas, and a group after Djokovic and Rafa Nadal. And then you guys like Dominic Thiem, Shapovalov, and Felix Auger-Aliassime, which maybe in the future. I don't know about this year. So for once, I'm kind of agreeing with Mats Wilander. I think this is the best surface for Roger. I say it every year, but this is the best place for Roger because of the speed and the low bounce of the court. He's got an added bonus that he didn't play ATP Cup. The draw is easy enough for the first couple rounds, I think, where he can kind of work his way into match toughness and then have a great match, hopefully against Hubert Hurkacz. Maybe not. Maybe Hurkacz will be an epic struggle, but to me, this draw, the way the court plays, Federer being pretty fresh, just like in 2017, not having to play anything, it could be a special year. I know some of you out there saying, Matt, you pick Federer for everything, but come on, you got to admit, he's got a lot of stuff working for him this time around, assuming he can get through those first couple matches and find his game quickly, which no reason to think he won't with that draw. Odds, I got this page here. I'm going to skip over this, not too interested. We went overtime here today, so I'm just going to do Braden Schnurr. Braden Schnurr calls out the selfish Rafa and Roger at Melbourne Park. World number 103 has called out Rafa and Roger as he believes the top players need to use their position and speak up about potentially hazardous playing conditions at Melbourne Park. The Australian Open qualifying event got underway on Tuesday, and organizers faced much criticism after the opening day as several players struggled with breathing and required medical intervention on the court. Here's what the man Braden Schnurr said. It's got to come from the top guys. Roger and Rafa are a little bit selfish in thinking about themselves and their career. They're near the end. All they think about is their legacy and not thinking about the sport itself and trying to do what's good for the sport. Those guys need to step up. Well, Braden Schnurr, he has a chance to come through qualifying and be one of those qualifiers you see Rafa play. I sure hope that we see Braden Schnurr play Rafa Nadal early. That would be awesome because this is bogus. Roger and Rafa, okay, so one story maybe you guys have seen out there in the general news world is that Amazon's Jeff Bezos, is he the richest man in the world or second? He has like $100-something billion total. Some of that is stock, I'm sure, but I'm sure he's got plenty liquid assets available. He donated $1 million Australian dollars, which is like a little over $500,000 US dollars recently. So that's coming from the richest man in the world. Just alone, $5 million Australian dollars, 5 times what the richest man in the world gave to Australia for fighting the bushfires. 5 times that amount was raised by these tennis stars who did the rally, the relief rally for whatever it was called, the Australian Open Rally for Relief. So just that night alone, Rafa and Roger, and a little help from some of their friends, but of course Rafa and Roger, the biggest names right there. Djokovic, Serena, pretty big too. Don't get it wrong. But Rafa and Roger did their part to raise 5 times for the bushfires, 5 times what the richest man in the world came up with. And not to mention, I'm sure they've taken some money out of their own pockets and done more than that. So, Braden Schnurr, I think you're a little out of line there. And Roger and Rafa, they've shown plenty of times that they care about the future of the sport. And if you were in their position, would you not be mostly focused on preparing for the first major of the year? Like I said, it's 2020. This is the most important year in the GOAT debate probably ever. This will probably be the year. So what's going to happen with the smoke in the Australian Open? Now, you probably have seen the story where what's her name? Some lady playing in qualifying, she couldn't finish the match. She was having like an asthma attack from the smoke pretty much. She couldn't breathe. Had won the first set, felt like she had a real chance to win it. It's a big deal coming through qualifiers and making it into the main draw. And she had to retire because she couldn't breathe out there. We've seen plenty of players saying this is ridiculous. And I got to say, it does seem pretty crazy. After we heard they had indoor courts that players could use, but for some reason they haven't been using the indoor courts. I don't know why. So here is what's going to happen from sportsbusiness.com. Australian Open organizers adamant the tournament will go ahead on time. Craig Smiley Tiley, Chief Executive of Tennis Australia, has definitively stated the Australian Open is happening and on time. So this feller, Liam Brody, who played in qualifying also, he says, the more I think about the conditions we played in a few days ago, the more it boils my blood. On tour, we let so many things go that aren't right, but at some point we have to make a stand. All players need protection, not just a select few. And then I think it was him or another player who said that they had saw on Australian TV that morning before they played that there was a warning to not even let your pets. Do not let your pets outside. The air is too dangerous for your pets to breathe. And he said, okay, pets can't be outside, but we can go out there and playing a tennis match. It is a lot in physicality. There's not much you can do in life that is going to require as much energy and sucking in air as playing in a pro tennis match. So he's got a good point there. But Craig Tiley Smiley has said, we've got scientists, okay? We've got scientists, buddy. So pipe down and play your stupid match. We made a decision early on not to go through numbers with players. Oh, by the way, I think it was Alina Svitolina has an app. She has an air quality app, and she was posting pictures from the air quality app, which I'll agree with Craig Tiley on this one. So he says, because it was an extremely complex issue. Air quality is very complex, very confusing. It's made more complex and more confusing by going on an app because there are different apps and websites that will give you different readings. Our medical team was satisfied with the conditions that the players were competing in per all the research and the data and the science that they have. I don't know. I think we have enough evidence that the players were definitely struggling out there. But I'm sure, the apps can't be the most accurate readings of the air quality either. A little bit more on that, and then hit the music because we're going to get out of here. We understand the anger, but a lot of it comes, as Craig Tiley Smiley, Australian Open tennis director, a lot of it comes from confusion and complexity of understanding what goes on. You see, the players, they're too confused. It's too complex. They don't get it. We've invited the players to come in at any time and have a conversation. If anyone at any time is not feeling well, we have a full medical team. We have a respiratory specialist on hand to deal with any of these issues. So the Australian Open, they're going full steam ahead. It doesn't matter. The top players, you're going to see them with a roof closed. I think day one of the Australian Open, day 1 or 2, I saw all the players that are going to play. It is going to be a nightmare figuring out who gets those courts with the roof closed because you have a lot of top players playing. You got Wozniacki playing. If she loses her last match ever, she's going to retire after the Australian Open. So we'll see how this unfolds. Expect more of this kind of stuff. Hopefully the fires are dying down. Hopefully it's not as big of a problem, but we shall see. I know there's been rain recently. It's very tragic what's happening with the bushfires. We'll keep you posted on all of that. Be sure to tune in. We will try to do a show every single day of the Australian Open. We will see you after day 1 play concludes. And I hope you're just as excited as we are. See ya!